Welcome to Herbally Yours, an adventure into the world of natural medicine. Here is your host, Dr. Kamhi, the natural nurse who will help you take the leap to ultimate wellness.
Greetings, and thank you for joining me, Kamhi, the natural nurse, for another edition of Herbally Yours on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. Listen on air or online at your favorite podcast place, such as Audacity, iHeartRadio, RadioNet, and really all over. And we're so happy to bring you the latest information about the many facets in the world of natural living. Today, I'm thrilled to have on board my own partner, Dr. Eugene Zampieron, and we've been business partners with Natural Alternatives, Health Education, and Multimedia Services for many, many years. Dr. Zampieron is a naturopathic physician, master herbalist, and professor emeritus of natural medicine. He is known as Dr. Z, trained at Bastyr University, and was a founding member of the University of Bridgeport College of Naturopathic Medicine, where he taught for 25 years as a full-time faculty member, leading their botanical studies department. Today, we're going to discuss autoimmunity. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Z.
It's a great pleasure, Ellen. Nice to see you again.
Now, I just want to tell our listeners, in full transparency, that you and I have been business partners for that long. You were a professor for 25 years. When we met, my children, who are now 47, were little teeny children, and yours weren't even thought about. You weren't even married. So isn't that amazing that we've been through so many life situations? And
yeah, go ahead.
If any of our listeners want to check it out, if you go to Facebook, The Natural Nurse, which is one of our online places, there's actually a picture of me and Dr. Z in front of a statue in Chinatown in 1992. Mm-hmm. And we've been doing that Chinatown tour that many years that our internet person who helps us post things, she put up a picture of us in the exact same spot a few weeks ago where we did our, 30th Chinatown walk. It's pretty amazing.
More than that, because many times we go twice a year. So, yeah.
That's true. But anyway, that's a great shot that she did right at the same location, that many years later. So we're still doing it. So we are certainly not new to this. And today we want to share information about something we think is really an issue for many people, and also some natural solutions. And that is autoimmunity. Dr. Z, I know you are actually really a specialist in autoimmune health issues. So let's talk about that. According to your research, is there an upswing in autoimmunity?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's a combination of many factors. We have, of course, our polluted diet, which is devoid of many micronutrients. We have genetic issues because people aren't using the right vitamins and they're not able to produce their own glutathione. We have hormonal issues, chronic stress. Toxins are, I think, the biggest thing, what they call persistent organic pollutants that trigger so many responses of the immune system going haywire. We have allergic foods where we only eat a handful, 6 different foods, 10 different foods the average American eat if you boil down to their diet. This causes chronic allergies and aggressive responses of the B cells, which are types of white blood cells, and the T cells. And then there's stress and mental duress and trauma and mind.
How about electromagnetic fields, which didn't exist before? I mean, in terms of even how we all have cell phones and we're all in front of the computer constantly, and just the 5G, which is all over the place in the air.
Well, you're more an expert in that than I am, but I do know it's a huge stress, that's for sure.
Just all those things together.
Yeah.
And then what happens is the body is trying to balance, at least that's how I see it. And what happens with autoimmunity is it becomes dysregulated.
Yeah, the B and T cells, they become skewed to become actually angry and belligerent and not listen to the auto-destruct sequence that we have when our immune system is, Paul Ehrlich, who was a scientist, called it horotoxicosis, which means that the body is not supposed to attack itself, and we have a lot of mechanisms that take out these immune cells that act as kind of like, mutiny cells. They're just kind of not listening, like rebellious teenagers. We were talking about kids before, they don't listen to their parents. They want to do things their way. These cells have to listen. They got to get with the program, and they're supposed to be taken out of commission. But for some reason, these systems fail, and it's very complex. I teach a 2-month sequence of my autoimmune course as to why the immune system stops listening, and it's multifaceted. And it's interesting that mainstream medicine says that they don't know the cause of autoimmune disease, yet there are a myriad causes. You see, they're always looking for one cause, one drug, one solution. And that's not it with these complex diseases that we're facing in this day and age.
That's so true. Also, something that I'm seeing, and I imagine you are, and I'm sure there's documentation about this, is that not just older people get autoimmune conditions, more and more children are also suffering with various kinds of autoimmune issues.
Yeah, we see it in very young people. There's also like this hormonal connection to autoimmunity. And I know there was these researchers that were looking to see if stress impacted the adrenals, and if that came before autoimmunity, or was it afterwards, because people were put on all these steroids, which of course suppresses the adrenals. And they found that sometimes the stressor could happen 10 years before the autoimmune disease manifested, when they went back in time. And they looked at in some cases, they looked at their adrenals and saw that their adrenal glands, which are very important endocrine glands, started to wane 10 years before the thing, and in younger people. So it's just, I don't know what we're doing to ourselves, but thank God there's a natural solution to these things.
There is, because, if you watch TV on any night, they will have a variety of drugs, many of them quite new, specifically for autoimmune issues. I see a lot of them for psoriasis and eczema, where, that in itself is not a terrible thing to have, other than it's disfiguring and people don't like it, if they have red scales on them. I have seen such phenomenal turnarounds with that kind of thing using natural therapeutics. But on the commercials, they show you their skin clearing up. Meanwhile, the skin problem is disfiguring, but it's not life-threatening. But then when you hear the adverse effects of those pharmaceuticals, it's unbelievable. I mean, they really kill you and shut your liver off, your kidneys off.
Many of them do. And because we're turning off important biological communication molecules called kinases. And we think that in our, narrow-minded way in medicine, we think that these kinases are either good or evil, but they're there to do stuff in the body that we still don't even know. And when we turn them off, thinking that we know better than nature, there's going to be ramifications. True, the skin clears, and sometimes the joints feel better, but there's many other, issues that happen, sequelae that happen from turning these things off without understanding what's going on. So yeah, that's why it can be very dangerous to do those types of things.
You're tuned in to Herbally Yours on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. And I'm Ellen Kamhi, the natural nurse. My guest today is Dr. Eugene Zampieron, and you can find out more about both of us at naturalnurse.com, and also Dr. Z at Dr. Z, that's DRZ, naturally.com. And today we're talking about autoimmune. Just so you know, we have actually co-authored many books together, and one of our books is called Arthritis, the Alternative Medicine Definitive Guide. And in that particular book, is a huge discussion of autoimmunity, along with many of the herbs we'll be talking about and all the scientific studies backing their use. So you may want to take a look at that book. It's called Arthritis, the Alternative Medicine Definitive Guide, by yours truly, Ellen Kamhi, the natural nurse, and Dr. Eugene Zampieron. So I know years ago when we were researching this book, Dr. Z, a lot of this was known, but the science has improved, even in terms of our topic for today, which is the use of natural therapeutics specifically to help balance that autoimmune response.
Yeah, now we can pinpoint where in the actual cell and the cell signaling, what they call cell signaling kinases and molecules like that. These are like very important checkpoint molecules that you can modulate. And the herbs modulate these things. They don't fully turn them off. So that's kind of, it's almost like turning off your light bulb by going into the garage and turning the whole house off. That would be like using some of these medications versus just going and switching off that one light bulb if you don't want that light on in the house. So that's the beauty of some of these herbs. Plus, they have all these great side effects. If we want to, there's no such thing as side effects. It's just effects. Whether they're good or bad is just a sort of an anthropomorphic thing. So, these herbs have been used for centuries for many different things. And remember, many ancient cultures recognized autoimmune disease many years ago. They didn't know the fancy kinases and the cell signaling molecules. That's all come in the last 20 years or so. But they knew they worked.
Yeah, but more and more, let's just talk about some of these specific herbs. And here's where you might want to get your notebooks out, or, all of our shows right here on WHPC are archived. So if you hear something today you like, we have it on the WHPC archive. You can listen to it again. And we're going to talk about a very specific herbs and a specific combination that brings together some herbs that you may not have heard of. And that is Rehmannia, cordyceps, and rosemary. So that's something that we're going to be talking about today in terms of how these specific herbs, cordyceps is a mushroom, but it's certified organic and it's being used in this sense as an herb, and how they work, which it's amazing how well they work. I know, Dr. Z, you have so many cases where this helped them, but of course, it's never unilateral. I think that's one of the issues when we test natural therapies, because we usually have somebody do a full protocol if they're your client, where you're going to look at a lot of mitigating factors, including their food, their exercise regimen, their sleep regimen, their mindset, as well as very specific nutritional supplements.
Right. The double-blind testing is designed to just check like one molecule, one drug, one designer thing, and see if it works. Whereas in holistic models, we should be looking at, is the model effective in helping people with autoimmune disease? And the model might change based on the individual, which medicine doesn't like. They like it to be, this algorithmic thing that's reproducible for every single person without taking any individuality into consideration. And that model doesn't really work in the real world, particularly with plants, because they're so complex, and foods, which are so complex in their ability to help us or harm us. So yeah, you mentioned some interesting things. So cordyceps is one of those, is a mushroom, which has been used it was considered a mushroom of royalty by the ancient Chinese, and great for energy. And actually the molecule in cordyceps has been shown to increase ATP, which is like human fuel. So it's fantastic for chronic fatigue syndrome. But what they found is interesting is that cordyceps became the foundational molecule for discovering the drug cyclosporin. A lot of people don't know this, but it actually happened in somewhere upstate New York. A grad student was isolating compounds and found this. Cyclosporin's gone on to become a phenomenal medication for people with serious eye problems, Sjogren's syndrome, which is where they attack their saliva glands and their eyes and their mouth and their joints, and lupus, protecting the kidneys from damage to lupus. So these are pretty good clinical trials that have been done on the cordyceps mushroom there. And so that's one of the ones that I think people should avail themselves to and maybe read more about and understand how it's grown and what's a good version of the cordyceps, and get organic cordyceps as possible and learn how to take it, or go to a practitioner that's trained in these things.
And also it has beta glucans, which is one of the actives that have been deeply studied.
All mushrooms are what they call amphoteric, and that's an interesting term that's actually used in chemistry to mean balancing, which means that if you're high, it brings it lower. If you're low, it brings it higher. So that's why these mushrooms can be used for cancer, where certain parts of the immune system have to be revved up, and autoimmune disease, where certain parts of the immune system need to be chilled out. So these herbs and mushrooms have a mind of their own. The most fascinating one is the rosmarinic acid, Dr. Kamhi. It's like phenomenal because it's one of the first molecules that kills off the belligerent white blood cells and leaves the undividing what they call naive white blood cells alone. So we talked about earlier in the program that in autoimmune disease, you have these populations of white blood cells that don't want to listen to the immune system. The immune system says, don't attack the tissue. And they're like, I'm going to do what I want to do, like a rebellious teenager. Well, the rosmarinic acid corrals them up and leads them to the auto-destruct pathway, and then leaves these young, impressionable, they actually call them naive T cells alone. Doesn't affect those things, so that they can be reprogrammed to understand not to attack your body, that the body is a friend. And we see this in very good clinical trials on Hashimoto's disease and lupus and other ailments, using the very powerful polyphenol called rosmarinic acid, which first came from rosemary, but it's found in other important plants as well. So those are two of the things. I think you mentioned Romania as another one too. That's
right. Well, wait. Let's talk a little bit more about those in particular, because if you do choose to use something like beta glucans and rosmarinic acid, which have been highly studied, as Dr. Zampieron just expressed, you want to see if whatever you're using has the right kind. Organic is always excellent. And also, have the actives been measured? Like, you want a minimum biomarker per dose, which means it's not just about getting a sprig of rosemary and eating a couple of leaves. You need to know you're having at least 200 milligrams per serving of rosmarinic acid. And then the actives in the mushrooms are beta glucans. So that's why we actually help to put together very specific formulations that, can be useful if you know that you have an autoimmune illness, which, unfortunately, so many people do. And I'd like to remind you that you are listening to Herbally Yours on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. And you can always listen live or online at nccradio.org or on iHeartRadio. And for more information on today's guest or topic, you can email us at whpc@ncc.edu. And I just wanted to remind you that you're here with us, and we're so happy that you are. Dr. Zampieron, you were telling us about some of the actives, and, it's really interesting that there's so much science behind this. Why do you think it's not more widely used in mainstream medicine?
These botanicals are very hard to patent. They're looking for things that are patentable to answer to their stockholders, the drug companies, because these are extremely, it's an extremely profitable industry, and they put a lot of time and money, of course, to bring a drug into fruition, and for the FDA to approve the drug, I'm sure costs a lot of money.
12 million.
Yeah.
I've helped some companies through that process. 12 million, about 12 years and 12 million. Yep.
Wow. So, I mean, a lot of the, herbal companies really don't have that cash. And so I think that's a big factor. I really do. I do. There's probably other factors that you know more about, but yeah.
But also, I actually think the herbal interventions are superior, because what you just described with that mechanism of action there's no drug like that. That's why when you're listening to the commercials about the drugs for autoimmune disease, such as eczema, psoriasis, autoimmune rheumatoid arthritis, and lupus, and when you hear these on TV, you'll see it says, okay, it has this action, but the long list of deadly effects, because the drug is not able to ascertain to leave the good immune system alone. It just turns off the whole immune system. So then you might, die from just the minor cold or flu because it ravages your body. Your own immune system is no longer working. But how Dr. Z described it is that the herbs are able to turn off only the super activated, aggressive, out of balance and out of whack immune cells, while they leave the other immune cells alone. And I don't know that we really can explain how that happens very specifically yet, but we know it does happen. Yeah,
that's exactly right. The studies showed that these cells went, the what we call the Mr. Hyde cells, like they went and they were destroyed, whereas the young cells were ready to be reprogrammed. Because you see, you could follow, the interesting thing is you could follow like a holistic lifestyle and remove a lot of the obstacles to cure in your autoimmune disease and things like that. But people weren't totally getting better. So I was talking to yourself, of course, and Dr. Friedman about we need to find things that would actually get rid of these autoimmune cells that have turned against the body, because they will recruit the older cells. They will recruit and turn the younger cells against the body. It's almost like, indoctrination of the youth to become criminals. And so you have to take out those adult populations of bad cells. Now, of course, there are some strong drugs that have been used in medicine that are chemo drugs, like methotrexate, for instance, that does that, but that kills the good and the bad cells all at once. Recently, we found out that there are some of these compounds that can selectively, they're called selective cytotoxic compounds. And that's what the rosmarinic acid is. It's a very novel compound. There's one other compound that I think does that, and it's from Chinese skullcap, which is Scutellaria. There's some evidence that it is a selective T cell cytotoxin. So in other words, it kills these abnormal T cells and leaves the normal ones and the naive ones, the new generation, alone. We have to always think like Chief Seattle, 7 generations down the line. Same thing with autoimmune disease. We have to think about if we can re-educate the body to stop attacking itself, because that's what autoimmune disease is. You're attacking your tissue thinking it's foreign. It's almost like you're allergic to yourself, people have said. And that's considered the cardinal sin. You should not be allergic to your own tissue. So there are natural ways to help with those things. Right. And it does take some work, but I want to reiterate the combination for our listeners. And it's a specific combination of Rehmannia root, cordyceps mushroom, and rosemary extract. And Dr. Z and I actually have worked on putting specific combinations together. And here on Herbal Yours, we do not discuss brands and specific products at all, ever.
So you can get in touch with that if you'd like to know more or visit our website. But this specific combination in this amount, and when it is organic and when it is tested for beta-glucans and rosmarinic acid, has yielded over the years excellent results. But again, Dr. Z, if someone is your patient, you're not going to just tell them, oh, take this pill and everything will be fine. It's going to be part of a holistic intervention.
Yeah, because we have to, get to know the stressors. We have to evaluate the patient for all of the obstacles to cure, which could include, like we talked about, their diet, their allergies, their toxic load of chemicals or toxic metals. Like I said, a whole hormone profile. And then are they able to make their own antioxidants? Because they found that in patients with autoimmune disease, they can't make antioxidants too well. It just turns out that rosmarinic acid is one of the strongest antioxidants ever discovered. So that's kind of interesting. Another thing that it does well. But yeah, you have to look at it holistically. And then many times there's a trauma that happened in someone's life that triggered their autoimmunity. So you may have to do some emotional freedom work to look at the trauma. Who knows what it was. So yeah, as we get to know people and understand their body, we tailor the approaches for them. But certainly these herbs are a big foundational part of our approach in holistic medicine.
So Dr. Z, now with the pandemic kind of receding, are you still seeing patients long distance if someone's not right there in Connecticut by your beautiful clinic?
Absolutely. Yeah, we're very busy with patients that want maybe to be assessed holistically and aren't happy with the 10-minute office visit or the specialists that are in, they're kind of silos, not talking to each other. Because we look at the whole person, the whole body in naturopathic medicine. We do have a lot of insurance that covers us too. So there's no excuse with this day and age. And the pandemic was beneficial in some ways in that it opened up the telehealth world to a lot of people so that they don't have to drive all the way to, where I live in Connecticut, which is far for some people, close for others. They can avail themselves to seeing people that are skilled in these particular ways of looking at health and disease.
So true. And one of the things I love about working in the natural health field is seeing people get better. It's not like when I work in conventional settings, which I've done plenty of as well, since I've been a nurse since 1973. And people don't get better. They're just given the next drug and the next drug and the next drug. And they're not healthier and happier over time because of those drugs. Although the symptoms are sometimes subside, which is good too. It's just we're looking more like what's causing it and how can we reverse that whole process. So Dr. Z, I want to thank you so much for being our guest today right here on Herbally Yours.
Very welcome. It was a pleasure and an honor.
And thank you, listeners. You're listening to Herbally Yours on the voice of Nassau Community College 90.3 WHPC. For further information, you can email us at whpc@ncc.edu. This is your host, Ellen Kamhi. You can find me at naturalnurse.com. A lot of stuff from Dr. Z is there too. Inviting you to join us next week for another edition of Herbally Yours. Until then, stay healthy.